Hello, welcome to Tools in the Shed, a podcast powered by CarsGuide, ready to rip into car stuff that has caught our eye this week. I'm CarsGuide Deputy Editor James, and with me is Deputy News Editor Justin.
Hello.
And Senior Journalist Richard.
Quite happy to have the promotion, but thank you.
This week, we're looking at a fresh batch of bubbling hot hatches headed our way. We'll look at some fresh metal in the CarsGuide garage, and we'll catch up with the world's biggest proponent of conceptual telepathy in this week's MuskWatch. So stay with us. But first of all, we've had some feedback from last week, and we were talking about GMSV, the kind of new entity that replaces HSV and goes a bit further in terms of raiding the toy cabinet over in the States, and various models will come to Australia over time. Now, David Bertie, our old mate, said he was interested by the GMSV possibilities that we explored, but was left feeling uninspired and thinking, well, what will they actually sell? You know, it'll probably be small numbers, and why pay for a conversion when a car like the Mustang comes into the country already in right-hand drive ex-factory? And he says, well, what's stopping GM from releasing partially built vehicles for subsequent Oz right-hand drive conversion? To which I'd say nothing really. That may well be on the cards. You could certainly see that as a scenario. And the Corvette, by the way, will be factory right-hand drive, so there won't be any conversion locally. But he's kind of right, I suppose. Where do they go? What kind of volumes can they realistically hope to sell?
You can imagine it'd definitely be easier from a factory perspective. I mean, conceptually at least, to release, you know, a body and what have you, and just send the parts to Australia, and then GMSV can add obviously the right-hand drive components and just go from there, rather than sending fully built left-hand drive cars to Australia to then be pulled apart and put back there again with new parts. You know, it just seems like too many steps in the process. But I guess that's just how conversions, or remanufacturing as GMSV calls it, work. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
You never know whether there's a greater cost in stopping the assembly process, compiling all of those parts, packing it together. But for Australia, you know, what to be the most economical way to do it. Yeah. All right. And
manufacturing is fine-tuned.
Peter Panousis, our old mate, says GM has some mega cojones introducing GMSV after dumping Holden so unceremoniously. And we know that Peter's a former long-time Holden employee, so I think there's a little bit of bitterness coming through there. Yep. He hopes the Australian public votes with its wallet and shows this, quote, greedy organisation that we don't forget or forgive that quickly. And then he says, time to get back to work. My next car isn't going to find itself. And he signs off Peter Pan. And I'd never thought of it, Peter Pan. So Peter's ongoing quest for his next car, he's been wildly swerving this way and that in terms of what he's going to purchase. So the quest goes on for Peter Pan, obviously.
I can see him in a Suzuki Jimny, actually.
Yes. Yeah. Look, I'm sure he's obviously a car lover. My guess is he wouldn't say no to that because the Jimny is such a terrific little thing.
True.
Marco Vess is conflicted about GMSV. He wants the Walkinshaw Group to do well, but he feels dirty about GM and doesn't want to give them any more money. You know, and he also says, given GM's track record with new brands into this country, like Cadillac was going to happen, didn't happen, going to happen, didn't happen. Opel happened, barely happened. And he says, look, Walkinshaw should just stick to converting Rams and look for some other business because it's probably not a healthy relationship, which is an interesting perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely safe to say, or it's an underestimate to say that you know, Holden has burnt some bridges there and definitely made its loyal fan base feel a little bit, you know, lost.
Yes,
disappointed.
There's a lot of pent up resentment. Among people that maybe you go through the however many stages of grief it is, and one of them's anger. I think it feels like we're in the anger phase at the moment. That people are really angry about it.
Yes.
Well, Lofty Visions gave us a rundown of his GM experiences, and he's nothing if not loyal because he kept on going with GM product despite all of this. He had a 1999 Holden Suburban, so when Holden briefly sold the Suburban with Holden badges on it, 6.5 litre turbo diesel V8 that used to die at inopportune moments, including the right lane of the freeway once. So that's not nice. He had a VT SS Commodore that slowly fell to bits. A Gen 3 Camaro that did the same. Had a Vauxhall Senator and Omega in the UK that weren't much better. And he said, look, his take on it, great engines, shocking build quality. He's now a Subaru guy, and he resents the low rent cars inflicted on us. GM Korea, anyone? The sad way they killed off Holden, and he thinks the GM brand is terminal in Australia. He'd certainly never buy another one, with one exception, which is the Subaru Forester, which surprisingly was branded a Chevrolet in India. And he's absolutely right. And for people on YouTube, I didn't know that. We've got a picture of the Chevrolet Forester as sold in India, which is quite incredible. Now, Anthony Pagano and our old mate from New Zealand, Wax 333, wanted a laundry list of different GM products from Chevrolet, GMC, Buick, Cadillac, and both of them nominated the Impala, interestingly, but HSV Commodore stepped in and said that had been finished up earlier this year. So the Impala is now history. That won't be one coming to Australia. De Kook, Richard, De Kook. He agrees with me. Bring in the GMC Sierra 3500, which is a reasonably sized truck. It's immense. And he says that monstrous utes are his other midlife crisis dream, because last week he was telling us about how he wanted a W1 Maloo. So that'd be a pretty interesting garage, a Sierra 3500 and a W1 Maloo. Hammer Rock says, I doubt fans of the Camaro, and that includes me, will even consider for a nanosecond buying a non-V8 engine version of the Camaro. It's a V8 or go home, because Chesto had noted that there is a four-cylinder version of Camaro, and it might be a more affordable kind of option. Look, and John Schroeder agrees. Suburban, the bloke down the road, a funeral director, had one. Geez, it was big. Want to ride? No, mate, pass. So Camaro, four-cylinder, counterfeit, light beer, no taste, no colour, no bite, yuck. Yeah, totally. Escalade, gangster. He reckons it's the most searched vehicle in America. I don't know where he's getting his data from, but that's an interesting little factoid. The GMC Denali, which was the big Sierra 3500, big metal, big money, will be regulated out of existence. To which I thought, well, not if Trumpy gets another 4 more years, because he seems to be intent on rolling back environmental regs as they relate to the auto industry in the US. And then the Hummer. Now, we were talking about the new all-electric Hummer, and Chesto had noted that it had 15,000 Newton meters of torque. And we're just a tad incredulous. That's a lot of Newton
also
meters.
Had 15,000 Newton meters.
Exactly. So this all stems from a Super Bowl ad, which noted that it was a teaser commercial, was going to have 11,000 foot-pounds of torque. So that converts to 15,592 Newton meters, but it's actually wheel torque, which is where your engine torque is multiplied by the gear ratio and the final drive ratio, and you get a much bigger number. There's actually a great video, Jason Fensky, Engineering Explained, if you've ever seen him with his whiteboard, and he makes complex things quite simple on his whiteboard from an engineering point of view. He's done a great video where he looked at the Dodge Challenger. It's got 972 Newton meters of engine torque. Multiplied, though, it's 14,000. So this Hummer is going to have a bit over 1,000 Newton meters of torque or something like that as engine torque.
That is still plenty.
which is just heaps. Of course.
14,000 short of expectation, though.
That's true. They've set the bar very high. William Kay says, okay, if Tung can mention a car that no longer exists, this was a particular Cadillac, how about bringing in the Cadillac Seal? This must be the best looking car, albeit concept car, ever designed. And I can't disagree with them. I'd also add the Emirage Coupe that followed it. I think the Seal was about 2011 and the Emirage Coupe was 2015. What an amazing duo. Fantastic pair of cars. He says, forget the GM brands. What about the Toyota 4Runner? Any news on this ever making an appearance in Australia? And the 4Runner is in the US and other markets, but the Fortuner really covers that segment where the 4Runner would be. So I think there's no news really, William, on that one. And then in general, HSV Commodore came back in and said, look, a suggestion for a future episode, brands with an uncertain future. And that would be brands that could be gone in a few years, at least in some markets. And it's not a bad idea, looking at who's on the precipice, and the whole COVID thing will have pushed some even further to the edge, I suppose. So thank you, HSV. That's something we'll have a think about. Eddie Fuentes says he looks like Tung has been busy during the lockdown building Legos. I can see a Bugatti Chiron far back and a Dodge Charger from Fast and Furious. How about the rest of the CarsGuide team? What hobbies do you have? It can't just be cars, right? And I checked in with Tung.
No,
he's got the Chiron, he's got the Charger, he's got the Defender, he's got a 911 GT3 RS, and people on YouTube will be able to see the picture of all of those together. And he actually did a really good oversteer story on building the Charger and what the process was like. But yeah, that's his thing. What about you, Richard? What are your hobbies?
I was going to say, believe it or not, Tung's also married. You might not have got the impression from his Lego abilities there, but he's actually fairly normal. What do I build? I build real cars. I've got a 1951 Ford. That's where I put most of my money. It's got a 351 beautiful Clevo V8 engine in it. And it looks absolutely stunning at the moment. It's finally ready to drive. So that's what I put all my money into. Yep.
Great. How about you, Justin?
My hobbies at the moment in Melbourne in lockdown is probably staring at the wall. I'm very good at that. But normally when I'm not staring at the wall, I suppose if sport is a hobby, I probably consume a lot of my time watching sport, NBA basketball and AFL football, the only type of football in the world. Is probably what I partake in the most, and really bad reality TV.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Is it Married at First Sight? That MAFS?
Oh, absolutely. That's one of the.
You love the Married at First Sight, really?
I watch some absolute filth on the TV. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, my collecting hobby is that I've got a collection of 1/43 die-cast cars that represents my top 50 driving experiences. So if I've driven something that was amazing, it might have been a great location, I'll go and acquire a 1/43 scale version of it, and I've got it in a cabinet, all of them. And if something goes in, something goes out. So it's got to be pretty special to bump a car out of that. Like one of them's a tractor. There are a couple of racing cars, and there's stories. So I can sit there and just look at those and remember immediately the context for that drive. There's an FSM 650 Nicky in there that wouldn't reach 100 kilometres an hour uphill on the main straight at Oran Park. All those stories are just in that cabinet. It's terrific. So that's kind of a hobby of mine, I suppose, along the line of Tung's. But now, J.S. Meta says Camry Hybrid, and that's the car I'd been driving in the garage last week, is an attractive buy. What's the future for sedans in, say, 10 years? He says, if I had to predict, all we'd see are hatchbacks and SUVs. Would love to know what you guys think. Is it worth buying a sedan nowadays? And I suppose Camry feels like a fish that's rather large, but in a pond that's shrinking. It's the number one sedan by a long, long margin, but people are just going away from that body style altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, since, the 70s and 80s were the kings of sedans, the average family car was a station wagon, was a wagon version of a sedan. And then in the 1990s, SUVs came along, joined things like, Land Cruiser, but you had things like Vitara. And then that made way for like CRV. And then before you knew it, we're into CX-5s and Santa Fe's and gone now
on it goes.
Sedans. Yeah.
More than half the market being SUVs.
That's right.
I think it's important to make a distinction though between mainstream sedans and premium/luxury ones. Yeah. I mean, that top end of the market is going to be around for a long time. Your 3 Series, C-Class, S-Class, 7 Series, so on and so forth. But then when you're looking at the mainstream market, like you said, it's Camry and not much else. And in 10 years' time, it might just be Camry only.
Yeah. True, but I reckon a lot of E-Class buyers and S-Class buyers from, say, 20 years ago would now be driving GLEs and GLSs.
Absolutely.
And stuff like that, yeah.
But there still will be those traditionalists that will want a 3 Series and will go and buy a 3 Series, more so than a Camry end of the market, So I think there's a bit of life left in the more expensive ones, but maybe not the cheap ones.
Yeah.
Oh, just wait for the M3 Touring. It's around the corner.
Oh my God! What a dreamboat!
M3 wagon. Want that? Anyway, and we finish off with Gulam Dust Gear. He's given us another 16 thumbs up. So the D-Tut is standing at 85, which is quite a solid tally. people on YouTube will notice we now have a graphic to describe the details. So we'll keep that in play in the hopes that Gulam continues to enjoy the show. But we will move on now to hot hatches. And our very own Stephen Otley wrote a story through the week about, if you're thinking about a hot hatch, it might be worth waiting because there's a fair bit of exciting news coming down the pipeline from a whole bunch of different brands. And wanted to chat with you guys about what stood out. We've got several. Hyundai i30N, the new Golf GTI, which of course is the evergreen hot hatch amongst all of them. Yaris GR, goodness knows what it'll cost, but it'll be quite a car. What's standing out for you guys?
I think for me personally, the GTI, although there is a new one coming, I don't know if it just generates the amount of excitement that it used to. I mean, we've pretty much come to accept, or a lot of people have, that it's the benchmark hot hatch, but I just don't know. In recent years, there have been a few very compelling rivals come along. The Honda Civic Type R, which is getting a facelift at the end of this year.
No.
i30N at the end of this, start of next year is getting a facelift and getting a dual clutch transmission.
Yeah.
For mine, those two were definitely better than a GTI. But it's interesting.
i30N all the way. You've got the reliability of Hyundai hardware and mechanicals and engineering, and you've got something which feels just so sharp. And I love the manual in that i30N, but I think the dual clutch is just going to make it more accessible to more people. Really, I mean, I know that the Golf GTI historically started it. Well, Peugeot 205 and Renaults as well, hot hatches back, B roads through Europe and in the UK. But I really think the GTI is it's a little bit grown up and mature and conservative. Yeah. I love that the i30N still feels a bit like, oh my God, this thing wants to kill me.
Naughty.
Yeah. It's awesome. Well, that's what I'm looking forward to.
Last year I had the opportunity to have a fang in the i30N in the Targa Tour, which is the touring part of the Targa Tasmania. And I think, as I said at the time, it was really my first opportunity to exceed the speed limit on a public road in any car. It was a very rare kind of opportunity. And it was brilliant. It was really brilliant. So light and responsive. It's such a great car. So with a dual clutch, it'll be really interesting to drive that car and see what it does to its character. But Justin, to your point, in terms of the Type R, you've really got to have the personality to match that car, haven't you? It's like something out of a Hollywood film as opposed to a car.
That's a nice way of saying you've got to be a dream car, I think.
Thankfully, I'm a bit of a wanker, Richard, so that works quite well. Now, for mine, I, much like Richard, would take the i30N every day of the week, but the Civic Type R, in terms of driving experience, yes, obviously the looks are not for everyone. It is quite a bit of boy racer about that, but to drive, it's fantastic. And in terms of the update or facelift that's coming later this year, there's some pretty significant changes to suspension, braking, steering, etc. So, they're really trying to sharpen what is already a very sharp weapon. It's great to drive. Can everyone live with it in their garage, waking up every morning and looking at it? For me, I quite like it, but I know I'm in the minority. Probably the i30N is still a bit edgy, but not anywhere near as edgy as
I think if you'd had a big Saturday night and you meandered out into the garage on a Sunday morning and looked at that Civic, it could just tip you over the edge. It's pretty,
particularly if you get the new yellow colour, it's probably vomit-inducing for some people.
You said it,
I didn't. It's like a children's toy. If you stood on it in the middle of the night, you'd be going to the emergency room. Like, it's a bit sharp and pointy.
But there is a full-size Lego version of it that you could step on, and that would very much hurt.
Enter Tung. He can fix us up with that. But I think the adaptive dampers are going to get a new response tune, and you're right, the steering. And look, we're theorising that it's going to be at about $55,000, which is a lot for a small hatch, but one with that kind of performance potential, it puts a different light on it.
Yeah, absolutely. The price is up. I think it's $3,000 now to 55 or 54,990. And
they're going to fix.
Expensive. It'll be $60,000 on the road.
Are they going to fix that torque steer, Justin?
Well, that, as you know, Richard, adds character to the car. I mean, it's not trying to get away from you. What's the point? But
It's part of the auto lane change feature.
You're always changing lanes.
Sorry, yeah, of course.
Yeah, but I mean, Ford kicked it off with the Focus ST, and in the absence of an RS, it's still putting out a lot of power and torque. Where are we? 206 kilowatts?
Yeah.
And 420 Newton meters? That's a lot for a little hatch.
Yeah, I tested that about 4 weeks ago. Look, look, I love Focuses. They're overpriced, but they're a great looking car. The interiors are a little bit outdated looking, they're a little bit old. Yeah, look, I wanted more out of that car, and basically what I wanted was an RS, and you can't get that anymore. And that poor ST is trying to satisfy RS buyers and also be something you can use every day. It's really comfortable and it's really well put together, and the suspension setup's great. But I think for people really looking for something that's going to tear their faces off, they're not going to find it there.
Well, they've got plenty of options.
Yeah.
They're just not cars. The thing about the Focus is I reckon it looks terrific. I think that refresh of the Focus ST, it's really got some presence.
It does. The only problem is that you can get the exact same look with the ST line. So really there aren't a lot of differences apart from, the tailpipes and the rear diffuser. Really you can get, you can get the same look for a whole lot less. So that's one of the issues, I reckon.
And I mean, when Chesto drove it initially, the Yaris GR, he was raving about that car. It's not going to be cheap for such a tiny little hatch, but he really reckons it's a game changer in terms of the way it performs dynamically.
I think it will be a game changer. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a rally car for the road. They literally constructed a 3-door Yaris, which doesn't exist in the lineup otherwise. But anybody, that 1.6 litre 3-cylinder engine with 200 kilowatts out of a three-banger is pretty impressive. Manual, all-wheel drive, it's a Golf R in a way.
It ticks all the boxes of a hot hatch, doesn't it? It's beyond a hot hatch. It's a searing hot.
But I mean, we were talking earlier about how the GTI Golf has maybe got bigger and heavier and may have lost some of its intimacy in terms of the drive experience. You'd have to imagine that car is going to go right back to square one in terms of being small, light, really powerful, and hitting you right in the feels, when you're driving that car by comparison.
Stands on its own. I mean, based on a 3-door light car, there are obviously 3-door light car hot hatches, Fiesta ST, etc., but they don't come close to it on power outputs, all-wheel drive. It's going to be a hell of a thing.
Yeah. One of the things I like the Volkswagen lineup is that the GTI, yes, it does appear to be getting a bit more mature, and it feels soft compared to like an i30N, but you've always got the Golf R. So you've got all-wheel drive, and it's just, if you do find the GTI a little bit too placid, you can step up again, and that Golf R is brilliant.
It is.
I once upon a time was considering a GTI and ended up buying an R.
There you go.
Well, I suppose what the R gains in additional performance and the all-wheel drive, it loses in terms of that lightness of touch. That the GTI is a slightly lighter car and a little more nimble. Yeah. The R is a more solid kind of sledgehammery kind of experience.
Yeah. It's a straight line weapon in comparison to the GTI.
Yeah, definitely. And then we've got we've been talking a lot about the i30N, but the potential for i20N, which is the smaller package, which is an interesting one because i20 has been out of the Australian market for so long, but to come back in the form of an N would be really interesting.
Yeah, looks like Australia's not going to get the regular i20 like we don't get the regular Fiesta, but we are going to get the i20N, which is interesting because there's still a bit of mystery about the i20N in terms of what's going to be under the bonnet in terms of is it going to go after a Ford Fiesta ST or is it going to go after a Yaris GR? So it'll be interesting to see what direction they take it. But, more hot hatches the merrier, I say.
Well, that's it. Talking to the product guys at Hyundai, what were we launching? The Veloster, actually, last year. They mentioned that there's no way they're going to bring a regular i20 in. It's just not going to sell. but an i20N would absolutely, I think, sell like hotcakes. And I reckon it would be more a Fiesta ST than a Yaris. I think there's nothing going to be like the Yaris, so that's off the scale. But yeah, so Fiesta ST.
Could be the most
Steve
affordable
Otley,
hot hatch as well.
Mm-hmm.
The i20N.
Steve Otley was theorising that it would be a 1.6 litre turbo 4, so 150 odd kilowatts, 265 newton meters. So in a small package like that, and it's the same powertrain as the Veloster turbo, so that would translate pretty well, you'd have to think, into a little hatch like that.
Absolutely, probably only weighs about 1,100 kilos. It'd be a rocket.
Be a hoot.
Yeah, and then there is the GTI for the people that want the tradition and the heritage and all that goes with it, and the cachet, I've got to say, of being in a Golf GTI. 2 litre turbo, 180 kilowatts, 370 newton meters. So it's kind of up there. It'll be interesting to drive the 2021 model. That's all I could say. Just to see where it sits in that weight versus performance, how it behaves dynamically, how it feels.
My concern is with Mark 7 versus Mark 8 that's coming, there hasn't necessarily been a lot that's changed. It's still on the MQB platform. For Australia, it's still the same engine, still the same transmission, getting a limited slip diff, which is great. But, they haven't, it feels like, without having driven it, of course, that they haven't moved the game forward. Whereas, i30N's come in and smacked the Mark 7 GTI in the face. And Volkswagen has the opportunity to respond. Has it? We'll find out. But on paper, it doesn't seem like they've probably done enough.
That's a technique that you use often, isn't it, Justin? Just walking in and smacking someone in the face. It certainly gets their attention.
Exactly. It's one way to get their attention.
Well, that's good. I think it'd be terrific to hear people watching or listening what their thoughts are on the whole hot hatch thing. It's been around for a long time now, and these new ones look to invigorate that little segment. And what tickles your fancy out of the ones that are coming? Would you wait, or would you be in the market now? It'd be great to hear. But we'll move on to our garage and what has been in it. And Justin, I'd like to start with you. Notwithstanding limitations, because Melbourne and other parts of Victoria are in pretty tight COVID lockdown, but you've been in a Volkswagen Passat. Fill us in on.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, I've been in the 140 TSI Business, which is a new variant in the facelifted Passat range. As you mentioned, James, obviously I've only been able to drive it to the shops and back for the last 5 weeks, and probably another few more at least. But it is very much your, as its name suggests, a business sedan or an executive car. It isn't the most exciting vehicle in the world, but it is certainly comfortable and easy to drive, which I guess is the whole point of a fleet car, I guess. But at the same time, you still get nice little luxuries as well, like heated seats and what have you. And like I said, it is a nice drive, and certainly not one you'd complain about. If the boss handed you the keys and said, this is yours, you'd be more than happy. But one thing I really appreciated, and I think it's the first car I've driven that actually has it, is wireless Apple CarPlay. To be able to get into your car with your phone in your pocket, not even think about it, and have CarPlay pop up on the screen, have access to Google Maps, your music, all that kind of stuff. Like, it is such a seamless integration and execution. And for that reason, I'm really enjoying it.
I drove the Business a couple of months ago, and there's no more aptly named grade for any type of car than the Passat Business. And is it the wagon as well?
No, I've got the sedan.
Ah, right. Even more business, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I know you've got French brands like Renault and Peugeot who name their grades Allure and Intense and things like this, and it's so German that it's just got the Business.
Yeah,
it is the Business.
It is what it is.
It says on the tin.
Yeah. Well, there should be another one called Drudgery or something, if you've got, and really get serious about it.
To make it better, my one's white, which again,
colour.
So,
Justin, that point you raised about the connectivity and wireless Apple CarPlay, it's so good. And one of the things that we experience jumping in and out of a different car each week is the first thing we do is we connect our phones, and we get this. Not all phone connectivity in cars is the same, and we know the brands who are good at it, and there are some brands which are terrible. I've had calls disconnect, all sorts of things happen because it's the system that the brand has used. But I think Volkswagen are pretty good. Hyundai are pretty good. Toyota, not that good. Yeah. So
I think to that point, Richard, the thing that gets me is you tend to say, all right, connecting the phone, whatever it is you do, that's a one or two off. Once you own the car, you do that and it's connected.
Yes.
But the thing that is extra instructive is how it can misbehave over time.
Yes.
So you think it's set and forget and it's all hooked up, but actually it's not. There are certain brands that come to mind where you get in the car and where's the Apple CarPlay? It's gone away magically somehow. And you've got to reattach the phone and it becomes a real pain in the neck.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been experiencing that in the car that I'm in at the moment, which is the Toyota Fortuner.
Okay.
Nice segue. I did that.
Well, yes, Richard, tell us about the car that you've been driving this week.
Well, I've been driving a Toyota Fortuner.
Amazing.
I know, yeah, that's right. It's the updated Fortuner. There was a launch last week. It was the Hilux, updated Hilux and updated Fortuner. Matt Campbell covered the Hilux component of it. I'm doing the Fortuner stuff. We're out filming yesterday, actually. We're going to do a really good job of this. I covered what it's like to live with the Fortuner in the city and in the suburbs. And we've got Marcus Kraft, who's going to be covering what it's like to drive off-road in the rough stuff.
Perfect.
So, getting back to that connectivity, it's got wireless Apple CarPlay, but I just can't get it to work properly. Whereas, with the Volkswagen, it obviously works straight away, and I've used it before, and it does. And at one point, someone calls and it knocks something else out. And so I'm just finding this, and I think Toyota use like a third party to provide their tech equipment in terms of screens and phone connectivity. So I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but I'm just finding that there's a whole lot of issues. And it's not the only car. I found that in the Grand Via and I found that in the Supra and other ones as well. So it seems to be whatever screens and whatever displays Toyota use. But apart from that, the car's been magnificent. It's got it's got 7 seats, but it's not like the Kia Sorento or a Toyota Kluger because it's based on the Hilux Ute. So like that Ute, it's highly capable off the road, which is why we're getting Marcus to do the off-road stuff. And that means that around town, in the city and the suburbs, the ride is overly firm. Even though it's got coil springs all round, it's still really firm. I've got used to it over a week. When the family first got into it, we were all like, oh God, this is really uncomfortable. But after a week, no one said anything. You kind of get a Stockholm syndrome with cars where eventually you just love it no matter how, rough or firm it is. So we've got used to it. I'm sure if you bought it, you'd be used to it as well. And you'd be certainly, if you're taking it off road, like regularly, you're going to be able to forgive it for being a bit firm on the road. It's practical. It's got rubber mats that you can just take out and hose out and drive and put back in again. It's got hand grips and handholds everywhere. It's a really practical bucket on wheels, and it's been great. The only thing I don't like about it, really, are the fold-up seats at the back. Rather than folding flat, the third roll actually hoists up and then latches on, just like
right.
So that blocks out those rear windows. It's a bit difficult. So when you're reversing, you've got no visibility if those seats are in place, like strapped up. And also, I just don't like how they eat into your luggage space as well. So the fold flat seats, of course, they raise your boot floor, but you've got a nice clean area. You've got these hanging there as well. And at one point, my little 5.5-year-old was mucking around with the tag, and the whole thing went like that. And it was all right because it's spring-loaded, so it doesn't slam down. But it freaked the hell out of me that they do just sort of can fall like that. So that's just another little thing as well. But yeah, so keep an eye out for the review. It'll be going up in the next week or so. So yeah, the Fortuner.
Fantastic. Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you, Richard. I will chip in with, for the first time in a long while, I've been driving a Citroen. I haven't been in a Citroen for some time, and this is the C5 Aircross in an arresting shade of orange, I must say. You're never going to miss it. So it's the Shine. There are 2 variants. This is the premium one, the Shine. So it's nearly $47,000 before you've put it on the road. And in fact, right now, there's a driveway deal, $51,389. So that you've crested the $50,000 threshold for this car. 1.6 litre turbo 4, 6-speed auto, front-wheel drive. They're claiming about 7.9 litres per 100, which isn't exactly spectacular because it is a reasonably large car. The plus column, I said, it stands out. The design is classically Citroen, and you're going to either love it or be turned off by it, I'd imagine. It's quite polarising. It sits on big 19-inch rims, this shine, so it looks that just improves the looks in my opinion. It steers nice, practical. There's a lot of load space. It's got a huge rear seat. You can easily sit 3 adults across the back seat. I reckon that's a big advantage. The boot's big, and the second row slides so that you can adjust leg room and load space according to what you need. It's also loaded from a safety point of view. It's got all the latest safety tech that you would expect. But on the negative column, it's just a bit sluggish. You know, you're talking around 10 seconds, 0 to 100. So it's not, snail slow, but it's certainly not brisk. You have to really encourage it to get along, which can get a bit tedious. And things like halogen headlights, even in the top model, that feels really off the pace. But overall, I think it's got a big personality, and you've got to sign on for that kind of automotive statement if you want to buy a Citroen. You're someone who wants to make a left of centre statement about what you're going to drive. It's really chock full of personality. But driving it, I enjoyed it.
I love the seats in it. They're
So
comfortable.
Yeah, they are.
I want those seats in my home. They want that to be my
There's something
lounge.
about French cars and seats.
Yes.
I remember, so much of modern cars componentry is outsourced to suppliers.
Yeah.
But Peugeot, for example, for the longest time, I'm not 100% sure whether they still do, made their own seats in-house. That was just a core strength of the brand. They made their own shock absorbers. They made their own seats, things that led to a comfortable kind of drive. But you're right, the seats are terrific as well.
I went to the launch of that car, and we watched a presentation. It was on Bastille Day, and they had the slide projector up, and we watched the presentation, and there was about 15 minutes just on how they did the seats.
Right.
And they had like you could see the compression rate. I'm doing a German accent, but there were a lot of work went into getting it all, and there was hands doing this and bums doing this and all sorts.
It was a slide presentation, Richard. Was that in the carousel, or were they putting them in individually and sliding them across?
Yes, it was like a home movie. They just put, that one's in upside down. I'll put that the right way
sorry.
Up. There it is.
Yes, sorry, it's back to front. Yes, sorry about that.
Oh, that's the one that shouldn't be there. That's from the holiday. It's like,
I mean, when you think about driving a car, the touch points quite literally are the seat and the steering wheel. So you want both of them to feel terrific. And I think driving that car this week, both of those things were great. The seating position was really good. You just got to be ready psychologically to buy a Citroen. That's all.
What about the ride, James? Do you enjoy the ride?
I thought it was pretty good.
Because they put a lot of work into that suspension.
Yeah, I didn't have any complaints about the suspension and the drive. I found the steering pretty responsive. It's just that the engine could have done with a little more oomph, to make it easier to drive.
I often think to myself, like, I'd like to build the perfect car, like take Citroen seats, take that engine out, put the engine from, I don't know, the 5-litre Mustang into the C5. I'd like to hear what other people, their ultimate Frankenstein car would be. What engine, what seats, what wheels, what cabin.
That's what the Winton Motor Company was doing for many years, was just acquiring components from different brands and compiling them into their one-offs. Yeah, a special atelier kind of service for customers.
The fastest 3-door sedan in Australia in 1983 was the Winton Turbo.
Winton Turbo.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, now we are going to move on. Thank you, guys,
Thank you
for all that. We're going to move on to our favourite segment. It's MuskWatch. Right. Now, we alluded to the fact last week that Elon was going to have a demo of Neuralink on Friday, US time. So it was just a little bit after we did the podcast last week. And sure enough, that happened. And Neuralink says that they're designing the first neural implant that will let you control a computer or mobile device anywhere you go. So these micron scale threads are inserted into areas of the brain. I don't know how they're selected, but you've got a little interface in your noggin where they can plug in and hook you up. So they also showed on Friday a surgical robot that's going to implant it. So you sit in this kind of oversized dentist chair, thing comes down around your head and boompa, puts this plug into your head, which seems a little bit extreme. But there was the 3 Little Pigs demo, was the actual demonstration of this technology at work. And the star was Gertrude the pig, has had this implant, and the display showed real-time beeps from her brain, and she'd had the implant there for 2 months. Seemed like a very happy pig, was snuffling around, in some straw and doing what she did. And you could see what was happening in her brain. Now, PETA, the Animal Protection Organisation, weren't thrilled with the fact that pigs had been used for this experimentation. They made the point that animals aren't ours to use and suggested that Elon should use his own brain, which would be an interesting take on it. If he turned up to the demo and just flipped open his plug and kind of connected, that would have been something pretty special. Yeah. But the meme world went off pretty well. And there was one where the pig thing happened. If you've got a Euro US 2-pin plug, just happens to line up with a pig's nose, and you can you can plug the plug in at the front there, which seems kind of practical. But also there was one that Mr. Pritchard, our producer, dug out, which was a meme of when your Neuralink chip gets hacked, and there's a woman standing there with her hands on her head, and she's been rickrolled right into her brain. So there's nothing she can do about it, which seems pretty confronting. Oh, and on Twitter, so many people want to be part of a human trial. You wouldn't believe the number of people who are seriously out there saying, pick me, I want to do this, I want to be part of the human trial. But engineer Azam Miralam said, is it going to make me remember what I was going to say 5 seconds ago? Wait, what was I saying? So I thought that's pretty good. And Scott Geloff says, how is this different than just an external EEG? So really what they're just getting is signals out of the brain. There was no sense of the pig controlling anything or making the pig do things. It wasn't exactly a two-way street. So that seemed like a fair enough point. But early days, amazing. And it will potentially be able to help people who are physically impaired and do things that they never thought they could. So let's see where that goes.
I don't know, JC. I think it's all going to come together. The space side of the business, the autonomous electric cars, and the neural implants. I don't know. The
implant robot is fairly scary.
I think
it's a trap.
I think
well,
like a triangle.
To that end, Elon tweeted just 2 words: conceptual telepathy on Twitter.
That's what I'm talking about.
One of your extended family members, Richard, Black Deathberry, said, you're going to need to take me to dinner first, which I think was an emphasis on the conceiving bit of conceptual telepathy. And Gavin Huffine said, lol, I mentioned this to you like 3 days ago on your board account. Now, board Elon Musk is a piss take on Elon Musk. It's not. He doesn't have this account called Board Elon Musk. So this guy Gavin. Look, I told you that 3 days ago on your board account. No. But anyway, Free and Anya said, telepathy me a pile of $500 bills. That's a fair request. He's got a lot. But speaking of money, there was a story starting to bubble around last week. But it's been confirmed, and Forbes reports that Elon has confirmed serious Russian Bitcoin ransomware attack on Tesla was foiled by the FBI. So what it boiled down to was that a Tesla employee was targeted by a ransomware hacker offering $1 million in Bitcoin for this person at the factory in Nevada to just install some ransomware software on the Tesla computer network. And rather than take the money and do that, the person spoke to colleagues and the FBI was contacted. And this person, Igor Igorovich Khrushchev, a 27-year-old Russian man, was arrested and faces up to 5 years in prison if found guilty. So that was all foiled. And on Twitter, there were lots of calls for giving this employee $1 million or $2 million, or at least a Tesla, because they'd done the right thing.
A day off.
Exactly.
Something, right?
One person suggested a Starbucks gift card might be appropriate. But Dave, bracket, currently fishing, end bracket, says, WTF, Elon, they just wanted to install Bonzi Buddy. Now, Bonzi Buddy, I had never heard of it, but it was apparently a virtual assistant that piggybacked on the Microsoft system, and it was suspected to be spyware. This was the late 90s. A bit like your paperclip assistant that comes up, can I help you? It was a little purple gorilla, Bonzi Buddy, and it was capturing data in the background, and was a nasty little episode. So Dave, currently fishing, thought they wanted to install that. Nichiban wonder what they were after in particular, and Hoss said the fart button. So they wanted the tech for the fart button from Tesla. But we'll cut to the share price, and the 5-for-1 stock split has happened. So a Tesla share is now $447.37, which is way back when. And if you remember Elon's tweet about taking it private, $420 seemed like an extreme position to take. Here we are. It's 5 times that. So if you multiply it by 5, it's actually 2,236 and a few cents. So it hasn't moved a lot from last week. But The Guardian is saying, look, even diehard fans must be wondering if Tesla's stock is moving too fast. But apparently not, because it just continues to head skywards. And according to CNN and Bloomberg, a surge earlier in this week pushed Elon past Mark Zuckerberg to be the 3rd richest person in the world. So his wealth is estimated at $115 billion. So we were saying earlier off air that it's Jeff Bezos and what's his name, Bill Gates, who are in 1 and 2, and it's Bezos first, daylight second. But there you go. Elon's the 3rd richest person on the planet.
So he could so afford to give that guy $1 million.
Oh, a few. And that's what people were saying. Give him the $1 million. He turned it down to do the right thing.
He did.
But with that, we have reached the finish line. So I want to say thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
And thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
And thanks to our podcast prophet, night stalker, and part-time airport scarecrow, Mr. Pritchard, for his proficiency under pressure. Today, he's wearing a T-shirt saying, "Blink if you want me," metallic pants, and Scooby-Doo slippers. That is a really special look.
Combo.
Please pass on the word about the podcast and let us know your thoughts by searching for CarsGuide on Facebook and Instagram using the hashtag CGPodcast, or email us at comments@carsguide.com.au. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, please rate and review us. And remember, you can watch us on YouTube. But before we go, I was thinking during the week, I'm keen on a side hustle, cleaning car rearview mirrors. Put it this way, it's a job I can see myself doing.
Oh.
No.
Wow. Actually, good rear view mirrors on the Fortuner. Really good.
Oh, yeah?
Really,
Really
good.
good.
Well, I'll clean
ones.
I do. I generally charge about $350 a mirror.
Yeah. What about Mazda
It's not a
mirrors?
bad price.
You guys like Mazda mirrors?
I'm competitive.